I would like to thank everyone for joining us in person and online. We are here to address new developments in the 1998 homicide case of 19-year-old Jennifer Brinkman. Speaking today with the Marysville Police Department are Chief Eric Scarpin, Detective Wade Rediger, Detective Sergeant James Maples. We will have 10 minutes for questions after these remarks, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, Chief of Police Eric Scarpin.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you to the members of the media and members of our department who have assembled here today. I have some brief remarks, and then Bridget Larson will introduce some of our investigators who will provide additional details on this case announcement. We'll then stand for a few questions. There are many duties that a police department undertakes in service to the community. One of the most solemn duties is the investigation of a homicide. After the initial crime, regardless of how quickly the police solve it, many victims' families experience frustration and pain. You can imagine how many decades without answers would seek to aggravate these feelings. The same is true for our investigators. When I became the police chief in Marysville in September of 2020, I found a team that had not let the memory of Ms. Brinkman nor her case falter. With the support of police leadership and the committed assistance from city leadership, additional resources were dedicated to this case, advancing us to today's outcome. Too often, the discussion around the criminal justice system focuses on offenders and ignores the plight of the victim, the crime victim, and their families. Together, we rest easier today, knowing that we have performed our duty to our community, to Jennifer Brinkman and her family, and all that knew her. Before I turn things back to Bridget Larson, I want to thank our investigators, specifically Sergeant James Maples, and lead investigators Detective Wade Rediger and Joseph Bellamy. The resolution of this case would not have been possible without their efforts and the efforts of the detectives assigned to the case before them. One key investigator is Detective Dan Vinson, who cannot join us today. His contribution to advancing this case was invaluable to where we are today. Our entire investigative division assembled before you, led by Commander Lamore, put everything they had into this case as we closed in on our suspect. Many regional assets were called upon to assist with the furtherance of this investigation. And I want to thank the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, the Snohomish County Drug Task Force, the Renton Police Department, the Seattle Police Department, and the Redmond Police Department for providing resources and technical assistance where needed. All agencies are short on staff these days, and we could not have accomplished the resolution of this case without their help. For this, thank you. The novelist and poet Angelica Hopes wrote, "No matter how heavy the challenges we face in our life, embrace optimism, perseverance, tenacity, and courage." Our team has done just that, and we're proud of this outcome. In closing, I express my thankfulness again for our hardworking investigators. I appreciate the leadership of Investigations Commander Rob Lamore and the work that he demonstrated in resolving this case so that Jennifer and the Brinkman family can see justice recognized. Thanks also to the Marysville community for your unwavering support of your police department, the trust that you continue to place in our officers and their service to this great city helps propel us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next, I would like to invite Detective James Maples, Detective Sergeant, to speak to more of the background of the case.
The victim in this case is Jennifer Brinkman, as it's been stated, and she lived with her father over on Grove Street in 1998. At that time, the father, Mr. Brinkman, and his then-girlfriend had left for a pre-planned vacation, and on March 21st of 1998, they returned home to find Jennifer deceased in her bedroom. Jennifer was a social individual. She encouraged conversation as she would go to the library, walk around town, She engaged in telephone chat lines, dating sites, and actively sought companionship in people. Through the chat line is what we believe is how she ended up meeting the suspect. Just letting you know up front, we're not going to identify the suspect today, as there is still the judicial process that needs to follow. Detective Rediger will end up talking a little bit about his arrest. At the time of Jennifer being found by her father, it was evident from the beginning that a significant attack took place with Jennifer, and an axe ended up causing her death. That axe was left at the scene. It was one of pieces of evidence that we had that was processed. The evidence in this case throughout the 24 years had been sent on and off to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, and through that crime lab, they were able to identify DNA that was left at the crime scene, and it was labeled Individual A. Over the years, the case had changed hands from many different investigators, but even more so, there are a lot of other detectives assigned to help those lead investigators. And through that, leading up to this past year, Detective Rediger and Detective Bellamy took the lead of the case, and with the assistance of the current investigation team and all of the detectives, many that aren't actually here today, played a significant role in the outcome of this case and why we're here today. I'll let Detective Rediger speak about how the investigation proceeded up to the arrest of the suspect.
Good afternoon. Hi, thanks for being with us. I'm Detective Rediger with Marysville. So I got assigned this case, and basically we had our work cut out for us. We knew that a ton of detectives had done a ton of work on this case. We had binders and binders full of stuff. So me and our team, our entire team, kind of broke down and how to systematically go through and process all this massive information, data, and documents. We kind of went through as we could, as time allowed us, because obviously new cases are still coming in. So we took in chunks and heaps of it at a single time. So through that, we set through a roadmap, kind of how we want to proceed with the case, how we want to move forward. We routinely met over that course of months leading up to it to make sure that evaluate our process, make sure we had the best case going forward, change anything that needed to be changed in the process. It was a truly collaborative effort between our entire unit and outside units. During the investigation, prior to me taking lead detective for it, we already knew information indicated the suspect in the case had attempted to meet Jennifer and had sent her a letter just prior to her death. So based on that information, detectives had priorly tried to contact him, where he denied ever knowing Jennifer or having ever met Jennifer. Through that, we couldn't figure out who individual A was. DNA technology did not exist at that time that was capable of identifying and profiling that DNA sample to what we could use in an evidentiary manner. However, in recent advancements with DNA, we were able to facilitate the use of a outside agency called Parabon Nanolabs based in Virginia, who was able to process that, analyze that DNA, and give back to us, generate some leads for the suspect for it. So they were able to, they specialize in advanced DNA analyst services. Their genetic genealogy service is what proved crucial for us in this case. It utilizes public and consenting information to research and generate leads on cold cases for law enforcement. They do have a proven record of accomplishments for developing leads and suspect identifications on otherwise difficult cases. There is more information on Parabon outside. You'll see a little pamphlet with their information and label. If you have more questions, that's an excellent resource, or Parabon itself for that. We received DNA from the suspect just recently. That DNA was sent to the Washington State Crime Lab. They, in their diligent work, were able to confirm the DNA match found at the scene with the DNA provided by the suspect. Based on that match, we were able to identify probable cause to arrest the suspect for the murder of Jennifer. He was booked yesterday into Snohomish County Jail for murder in the first degree. This teamwork coming from the Marysville Police Department, from outside agencies, and from Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, from the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a whole litany of other resources that were in touch with us and helping us. This is a truly collaborative effort to bring about a conclusion to a long overdue case, and I'm appreciative of everybody's help and time on it. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and take about 10 minutes, and we can answer any questions that you may have about the case.
Is there anybody here who's worked on the case from the very beginning? Who's worked on it for the longest?
That'd be Commander Lamore, sitting in the back.
I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
All right, I will go ahead and introduce Commander Rob Lamore.
I did not do this.
How's it feel?
It's hard to put into words. I was the original case detective, and I worked on it for 9 months before I had to rotate out of detectives. And it's one of those things where it never leaves your thought process because it's unsolved, but you're able to continue to work on the projects or the areas of your current assignment. And it wasn't really until yesterday when we made an arrest, and I was sitting at home really thinking about it, that it really hit that we've got a conclusion to this, and we're finally able to put it on a shelf and have some closure, not only for us as investigators who have been involved in it, but for the family and the community, because the house is on a main road. And I'm sure that lots of community members drive by and say, oh, there was a murder that happened in that house, and we get to put that to bed for people. So it's a good feeling. It's really a bit overwhelming, actually.
I think you talked with the mom, right? What was her reaction?
Yeah, we had Detective Rediger and Sergeant Maples that talked to her. And if you want to speak to that, or I can just, she was extremely emotional. She cried and was very thankful for the work that we'd put into it. And so I think it was probably an overwhelming emotion for her to finally have an answer. Jennifer's father passed away in 2013, so we weren't able to provide him that closure before he passed away, but we're very thankful that we were able to come to a resolution for Mom.
Can somebody else answer some more of the investigation type questions?
You two come up.
I'm curious, did he voluntarily give a DNA sample, or how did you go about getting it?
So we did, the court authorized a search warrant to obtain his DNA and latent print sample. He did voluntarily give his sample when requested.
And that was a match the DNA from the scene?
Yes, correct.
Do we know what the motive was in all this? Was it a crime of passion? Was there a sexual assault? Any idea what?
Unfortunately, we don't have a clear answer to that. He evoked his constitutional right, so we don't get a clear answer as to what the motive, what the situation is behind it.
What's he been doing for the past 24 years?
He's pretty much either worked or been fairly recluse at home.
Do you know where he's been working? What kind of work?
We do, but we would prefer not to release where he was working.
Is he a suspect in any other cases?
He is not.
No.
Do you think this was just a one-off thing?
The information that we have, as we know it, it appears that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty rare, I would think, right? People don't typically jump from mild-mannered person to axe murder, right? I mean, how hard is this for you guys to wrap your heads around as investigators?
It's difficult. It took the team a lot of time debriefing as far as how we felt about the case, our emotions behind the case. We've always said through the process is we have just as much responsibility to not arrest an innocent person as we do to convict a guilty person. We take that mantra pretty seriously as we approach this case. We can only evaluate the facts as they come to us. We gather the facts, we gather the information, we gather the evidence, and we make a decision based on those. We try to keep all prejudice, all subjectivity out of that, and based on the information that we were presented with the information available to us, with being able to not explain his accounting for his relationship with Jennifer, we took action on the probable cause that we had and feel confident in the decision we made.
And can somebody explain sort of this chat thing that they had going on, how extensive that was and how they came to?
I come from the Tinder era, so my understanding of it is it's a chat line that was existed in the 1990s. I think it was called Nightline, chat line. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, and so through that, you call in to the service. They arrange you to speak with a random man or female that you talk to. Through that, you kind of talk over the phone. A lot of those conversations on the phone could, in our communication with people that did it, they could repeat over a series of time. Sometimes they would transition to letters. Sometimes they would transition to in-person meeting. Sometimes they would fizzle out and end right there. So we don't have a whole lot of history other than a letter, and we know that he had plans to meet her prior to her murder.
Okay. They had exchanged correspondence then, or he had sent her a letter? Do we know?
We have a letter in possession sent by him to her.
Do we know what it says?
We do.
Could you tell me?
At this time, we'd prefer to leave that, as we still are working on pieces to the case.
It was cordial in nature, but there was strong indications that there had been at least meetings prior, based on the verbiage of the letter, that there had been prior meetings or that there had been some sort of former relationship. They talked pretty innately about some personal matters that were released to each other, both on Jennifer's part and on the suspect's part.
Do you believe he was kind of grooming her in some way?
We don't have enough information to make that conclusion.
That's a good question.
Excuse me, I have a question. I saw in a public record document that I believe I read Miss Brinkman's family lived about 3 miles from the suspect. Was there any indication that the suspect had seen or known of Miss Brinkman prior to their meeting on the online chat?
It was a strong possibility. We did. Jennifer's mother at the time of her murder lived about 3.5 miles as drive time from where the suspect had lived in the Bellevue area. With that, we couldn't draw a strong conclusion, but there is a possibility that we couldn't eliminate that there may have been a prior meetup in Bellevue or something like that, but we have no evidence to be able to say that with certainty.
And oftentimes in these DNA cases, they'll come back with some sort of mathematical thing that says, the chances are 1 in 50 quadrillion that this is not the guy. Have you received that sort of information yet?
We did, yeah. Washington State Patrol, yeah. Anytime a DNA sample is provided to us, it gives a basically statistical anomaly saying how unlikely or how likely that this DNA typing would be existing in the public. I don't want to speak too much into I'm not a forensic scientist. You would have to refer to them. But yeah, they did provide a pretty astronomical, far more than people available on Earth for the chances of that this DNA would exist in a random circumstance.
Do you have that number off the top of your head?
One was in the quadrillions and the other one was in the septillions. So quite a bit.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. Thank you, everybody, again. Thank you again for being here, both in person and online. We appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, we will be providing contact information to our PIO on duty.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.